let's get underway, Natty. Welcome Nat, and welcome everyone to Real Dad Movement Podcast. We've got a phenomenal mother, business owner, woman, torturer. What are some of the best names you've gotten from your treatment over the years, Nat?
I kind of fell into elite sport. I did a clinic at a big sports med centre in Melbourne, and about 6 months after I graduated, I started in a fast stream rehab hospital, but 6 months after I graduated, they rang me up and said, do you want to come work with us? And I went, sure, why not? So I kind of got the job that everybody wanted, and they were really angry at me because it was like I never wanted it to begin with. But I was very happy there. So, you know, elite football, Olympic level athletes, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there. Never wanted to run my own business, but I don't quite know how that happened. My husband happened to be a physio and meant nothing due to physiotherapy. I was on holidays and he was actually a physio student of all things, so even worse. He was the one that wanted to open his own business. I really had no desire to. And then after a decade or so of him being a physio, he bailed out of the profession altogether and left me holding the physio baby, which was the running of the business, which is certainly not my forte, nor my joy and love, but in the absence of anybody else, I do it.
Yes. You do it well, I'm sure, Nat. But I'm interested though, like what do you feel is one of the key or one of the main reasons why physios tend to fizzle out or not last? I mean, they're probably don't chew through them as quickly as maybe PTs, but yeah, you're right. What do you think the reason is behind that?
I think it's actually well, I'll speak on behalf of my husband, that he loved it for a decade and then fell out of love with it. A lot of it to do with financial remuneration. Like, I think society thinks that physios earn a heap. It's a very labour intensive job, and it's a bit like, personal training is you've got to be there 100% of the time. So you are the product. And I think, you're one-on-one with people. I mean, we have 30-minute appointments one-on-one. We don't connect people to machines and leave the room. We don't see people, 3 people at a time. So when you look at the cost of that labour, as well as the premises and the receptionist and the blah, 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 the margins on businesses is very small. So you have these kids who get an ATAR of 98, 99. They can pretty much do anything. I think in society we have this kind of, it's almost like we feel there's a correlation between your ATAR score and your earning potential. And physio is one of those things where you actually get into the career and you go, well, I'm not earning anywhere close to what I thought I'd earn, and I'm working my ass off. So I think of a lot of men in particular leave. And they, they're intellectually capable of retraining in lots of other areas, and they tend to do so. So I know an awful lot who have not stayed in the profession, and really, I'll be as blunt as saying it's the money is the big reason.
Okay. So I hope that's not true with the ATAR thing, otherwise I'm in trouble. I got 30.3 in my I got 30.3 in my UAI at the time, I think it was called.
Yeah, but you're not a physio.
That's right, yeah, there we go. That's right. That's right.
I'm sure you would have been though.
Yeah, it's so true though, the labour intensive stuff, like, man, 30 minutes straight and you're giving your energy, and then regardless of what relationship you have, it takes a bit out of you, and that could certainly wear you out doing that day in, day out. No different to if you were just like you said, either a massage therapist or a labourer shifting bricks all day. It's a lot. Like I see, it's the sessions that you used to do with me, and unbreaking this broken body is a lot of work involved. If to do it right, like you said, I'm sure there's plenty out there that maybe still do machines or different methods that are easier on them, but to be effective as you've been, yeah, you got to rip in, don't you, so to speak?
Absolutely, and it's very similar to PT in that, the times that clients want to see you are early in the mornings or late in the evenings or weekends. So the other flip side is that it's not a very lifestyle friendly vocation. So it's tough in that respect, that, if we could get patients to come in the middle of the day, I mean, luckily we do, but a lot of clinics are top and bottom heavy. And certainly when we started, it was, 6 a.m. starts and 8 p.m. finishes, because that's when people wanted to be seen. And you twiddle your thumbs in the middle of the day. It's not family friendly. And a lot of times people go, oh, it's a great job for a woman because you can work part-time. And you go, yeah, great, as long as that part-time's, 5 till 10 p.m. Monday to Friday and, all day Saturday and Sunday. That's perfect. But, at the same time, I think, as with any career, longevity comes when you genuinely have passion for what you do. And I think the ones that stay in it either do love running a business and the financial side comes from selling, Swiss balls and, I don't know, creams and all of that sort of stuff. You're selling product that just churns itself over. Or, you just love what you do, which, and I'm luckily in the second category.
Oh, and it shows, Nat, with those magical hands that you have.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yes. I love torturing people. No.
That's right. Actually, yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like sometimes you'd be ripping in and other times will just be a delicate touch and I'd be kicking and screaming. I hope you don't have any video footage of that or any secret cameras of the pain, shame and squealing.
Although I do think I've got a picture. I don't know if you remember when we were talking about, the core early on in yours and my relationship of many years. And because you had the six-pack on your six-pack abs, you felt you had a really strong core. And I said, no, you don't. You're actually really weak. And my then 11, so it must have been 7 years ago, my then 11-year-old daughter had twice the size of transversus abdominis than you had. And I remember your face when you went, oh my God, like this little 11-year-old girl's got better deep core than I do. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, actually, I remember that. And I still say it to some of my clients as well when I mention and talk about you and some of the learnings when I'm obviously passing on different forms of mobility for them. I said, Sophie, Nat's daughter, 11 at the time, had a core twice the size of mine. And because people think core, as I'm sure you know, all those external obliques and abs and all that stuff on the outside. And then all I get is flashbacks of Sophie doing like single leg double unders and cartwheels and handstands. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like she's doing all these things that I couldn't even for the life of me do, even though I got all this big bulky, I wouldn't say show pony, I was fit, but all these external muscles.
Yeah, let's go show pony.
Yeah. Up until the CrossFit stage, and then you broke me down in a humble way. But I remember the ultrasound that we did, and I had to turn it on and off, and it was so thin compared to everything else. Like, oh no, it's really hard. It's a hard thing to control, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and I think that's where the fitness industry in general, physiotherapy included in that to a certain extent. We don't focus nearly enough on the boring little deep muscles because you don't get that nice feedback of, our muscle's really working. It's very, very hard to tell, for example, that the transversus is working in isolation. That a lot of therapists will say, oh no, I can feel it, I can palpate it, I can tell. And I don't dispute that, but you can't tell how it's operating in relation to the obliques and the rectus. Like, are you able to turn those superficial muscles off and still engage the deep muscle, which is what you need to, support your lumbar spine during the day, obviously. But you need to have that stationary while you use your obliques to twist and turn and bend and, all of that sort of stuff. So I think it's that the subtlety of the contraction itself, because it's a whispered quiet contraction because it's an endurance muscle, but also then the skill of learning, I can switch that one on and turn the superficial ones on and off without the technology of the real-time ultrasound. It's super hard to do, but of course that technology is expensive, which means a lot of practices don't invest in that money and convince themselves that, oh no, we can do it with just our hands. And you go, yeah, but can you? So those sorts of things, I think we've let the fitness industry or the public down in the fitness industry. And Pilates is a classic of, as soon as Pilates burst onto the scenes, is every exercises that uses any one of the abdominal muscles is a core training exercise. And I was like, no, it's not. Just because it works your abs doesn't mean it's working your core, your true core. Yeah. So, I think that's a bit of a problem that we slowly, gently need to address. Actually, not slightly gently. We need to quickly address it.
Oh, definitely, definitely, yeah. Because you'd say to someone TA or transverse abdominis, like you've said, and they'd have no idea. PTs wouldn't even have any idea on what that means. I didn't until I met you, but I was careful. I wasn't always a fan of the word core because I felt like there's something, without the pun intended, deeper and underlying here instead of just relying on. And for people who quickly things happen and they just have a blowout or their life falls apart around that trunk area, why do you think that is? Is that because they've just turned on those big external muscles all the time and they're fatigued and the little ones aren't supportive and something just gives out? Or why do you think that happens, that people just, because it baffles a lot of people, but I'm sure there's a pattern here in which they're not addressing the boring stuff or the intrinsic stuff in the first place?
Yeah, do you mean as in why does somebody just suddenly fall apart, like it seems?
Mm.
Like they were, yeah, well, I think it's not dissimilar to most health issues. That, like, why do you suddenly get a toothache? The decay process has been happening for weeks or months beforehand.
Mm.
Why do you suddenly have a heart attack? So there's cumulative error that goes asymptomatically, and the problem is that really, and it's an understandable problem. You know, how do you know that you've got an issue if you don't have any symptoms? But our Western medical philosophy relies very much on, if I have symptoms, I have a problem. If I don't have symptoms, I don't have a problem. Rather than understanding the continuum of dysfunction, it will build and build and build and build until the body finally reaches a point where it can no longer cope, and then you get symptoms. So I think of the body as always having a tolerance, a capacity, a tolerance, that we then add load to. Now, if our tolerance is greater than the load, then all is well. If the load is greater than our tolerance, then depending on the differential between that load and our tolerance, we're either going to cause damage or we're going to cause irritation. So you go, okay, well, what affects tissue tolerance? Well, it's, chronic weakness. We spend so much time sitting in a chair, and the evils of a chair, as you and I have discussed many times, are numerous and profound. And if we link it back to the core, that thing that, I don't know if you're leaning up against it, but I sure am.
Yeah, yes.
That thing called a back.
I'm sitting upright. You've trained me well, Natty. That's me leaning.
Yeah, there you go.
But
that thing called a backrest, it should be called an ab rest, because it's actually stopping you falling backwards, and it's your abs that would then prevent you from falling backwards. So when people are trying to work out, well, why have I got weak abs? How did my TA get so weak? It's like, well, because you were introduced to a backrest on a chair at the age of 5, and then for the better part of 5 days a week, 7 hours a day for the next 13 years of your life, you were encouraged and in some schools ordered to use that thing. And then little wonder when you're 40, you feel like your body's fallen apart. It's not because you've turned 40, but because you've developed these compensatory strategies since you were 5, and then the body's finally run out of capacity to deal with it. The load has got greater than the tolerance, and we fail. So it's usually like I say to patients, very rarely is it damage that we've done. Like when we have an injury, damage requires a significant trauma of great force. So to tear a muscle, if I grab this piece of paper, to tear this piece of paper, I have to apply an acceleration force. Otherwise, I bend it, but bending it is not damaging it. And for the most part, when people come in and say, oh, I bent over and I picked up a pot in the garden, and I must have torn stuff in my back, or I've blown a disc in my back, you go, punishment's not fitting the crime. Like, that pot is nowhere near heavy enough for you to, in isolation, have caused your disc to fail. So it's like, okay, then we have to look backwards of what else has decreased your tolerance to that load. And it's things like prolonged sitting, it's things like prolonged inactivity. And as we're learning now, it's also things like, emotional stresses, poor sleep, poor diet, smoking, all sorts of other lifestyle factors can reduce that tissue tolerance, so that the load at which it fails is less and less and less. And I think our Western sedentary lifestyle has really set us up for disaster. And that's something we really do need to address.
Yeah, well, it sounds like, especially what you touched on then, a lot of, I guess, inflammatory markers really. And and then you look at the body, and it's pretty crazy how resilient the body is for that period of time. It eventually breaks down, and it's crazy because what you said, it comes across pretty straightforward and simple, but no one seems to be looking at that as, the purpose of my life and living a life of longevity and in wellness comes about from doing the little things correctly. Everyone just seems to bypass that. And like you said, they just put up with it, and the body adapts for a period of time, and then it seems to fall apart, which I've seen so many times. And gravity never stops, does it? I mean, gravity is something that's always on us. But what do you find in your experience is like the number one, I guess, biomechanical issue or structural point where people seem to have the most issues?
Good question. I think it's I would kind of divide the body into two bits. Like, I think a lot of lower limb stuff really starts at the foot and the dysfunction that occurs at the foot, like a collapsing arch. And again, in our medicine, we've started to, in my belief, in language, confuse common with normal. So I've had lots of doctors and therapists say, oh yeah, but so many people have pronatic feet, it's normal. And you go, no, it's not normal, it's common. And I can give you a long biomechanical monologue as to why sitting, which a bit like the backrest reduces the need for your abs to fire. Sitting on a chair reduces the need for your deep hip stabilizers to fire. So your piriformis, your obturators, your gemelli, the muscles that basically hold the femur into the pelvis and stabilize the hip joint. Part of their role is to also externally or outwardly rotate the femur, which if you do that, like if you roll your knees out when you're standing, you'll see that your arch lifts up. So a collapsed arch relates partly to what's happening at that hip. And again, you sit a kid down from the age of 5 for 5 days a week, 7 hours a day for 13 years of their life. Those deep hip stabilizers don't have to work. As a result, their femurs internally rotate and their arch collapses. And then there's this whole chain of lower limb biomechanics that gets completely disrupted. I mean, we've seen an 11% increase in anterior cruciate ligament ruptures over the course of 5 years. And there's this big stuff about training for ACL prevention, which is great. But I think we're missing the point. We're not going back far enough. It's not necessarily about strength. Yes, it is, but it's about the correct strength. And when you blow a cruciate ligament, 9 times out of 10, you've had a combination of flexion, so bending of the knee, and internal rotation of the femur. Because that's the thing, that's the movement that puts the cruciate ligament on stretch. So if you've got all these kids running around with pronating feet, they've already got half the problem already. All they need to do is add flexion to an already pronated foot. Okay, then you also go, all right, well, if I bang an arch on a hard surface for long enough, if I walk on very flat, unstimulating surfaces, if I put kids in unflexible shoes that don't actually bend in the places that the foot's supposed to bend, well, the arch collapses in itself as well as what's happening at the hip. So you've got the double whammy there. So everything in the lower half then is now a mess. So I guess that's one of the most common problems. And then the other one is your thoracic spine, because so much of our society is downward and forward. Like, we bring hands together, we type, we're on phones now, we're bending over benches, and so we get very flexed in the thoracic spine, and anatomically, as soon as you flex the thoracic spine, you can no longer rotate it. So there's only 3 movements that occur in the thoracic spine. That's flexion, rotation, and extension. Well, you're not extending, you're stuck in flexion, and now you can't rotate. So those 3 movements then get shunted to an area of least resistance, which is the lumbar spine and the cervical spine. Now, you will hear people in society, vast majority of whom will either complain of neck or lower back pain. Very few people talk about the middle back pain. And when they do, it's usually referred from the cervical spine anyway. But yeah, I kind of go, well, yeah, the problems, the symptoms are the neck and the lower back, but the problem is, as you and I have had many times a discussion, your thoracic spine not being mobile enough. And again, that goes back, in my belief, to when we sit kids down in our society, the rot sets in. So feet and thoracic spines.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Yeah. That was a short answer for you, Nat. I was expecting at least another 15 minutes, to be fair. All good stuff, though. And it's so crazy. It's what you said then, looking at source, not treating the symptom, even with the ACL stuff. Yeah, what are they going to do? They're going to strengthen the quads, the hamstrings, or different. But what about strengthening the biomechanics and then that neural pathway to the brain so they can put themselves in that position more often than not. That's where I see more often than not in life, physio trainers, anyone in this space, not look at that stuff. It's like, do we just put a band-aid on it or mask something or treat the symptom? Yeah, you might need to treat the point that's either irritated or inflamed or needs attention, but you can't just keep treating it. It's like what we did when I came to you initially. I just come out of a shoulder reconstruction and I was quite rounded. My thoracic was super tight. So, but I remember we had this chat. It's like, well, what's ideal? You're like, oh, well, don't train the way you're training for the next 6 to 12 months. But I was like, well, I can't do that. So what we did is you would treat me and undo a bit of the damage, and then I'd train and I'd tighten up because I wasn't moving, in a biomechanically sound and evenly distributed the way it should be way. So I'd tighten up, you'd release me, I'd tighten up. But then that was the plan we had together, and we were both aware of that. But over time we got there, didn't we? It took a couple of years. But but eventually, like, it's my mobility, how I hold myself, it's amazing. Like, I know if I come and see you tomorrow, I'll be crying on the bed and screaming because it's you don't know until that just points or pops an elbow on there, guys, that that you do have an issue. But I'm aware of that now, which is that's the greatest blessing, especially like you said, on the ankles, because I've had a lot of syndesmosis and injuries from footy and what you said then, it's crazy about the femur. See, I never knew that about the femur rotating inwards under flexion. Straight away I thought about when I did my knee, and when I did my knee, both ankles were straps. It was like a horse's hoof. And then I had 2 groin straps on because my groin was always super tight. So my ankle had no movement, my hip had no movement. And then when I got twisted in the tackle, my knee exploded and I did my ACL.
What a surprise.
That's right. I was like, how could this have happened? Oh, and we were doing 1 RM back squats that week, so I'm sure there was probably a little bit of fatigue in there. But yeah, unbelievable.
Well, and in that too, I think, so many people focus on glutes too, that they'll either talk about glutes weakness or glutes tightness. And, I think that's one of my big bugbears is all of these people that stretch glutes. And you kind of go, why are you stretching? Oh, because they're tight. Right. What's your job? Oh, I sit. Right. So you're sitting for 8 hours a day, and in the sitting position, you are arguably stretching your glutes. Yeah, absolutely. So why do you think going to the gym and doing 30 seconds of stretching of your glutes is going to make any difference? You've been stretching them for 8 hours. They're not short and responsive to stretching. They are tight, overloaded. Why? Well, because they're probably trying to fix your foot. Because like those deep external rotators, your glutes can also externally rotate. And my belief is the deep ones have gone to sleep because they've been in a coma since the age of 5. So the glutes try and take up that role because the foot needs to have an arch to it to actually function. So we're overloading glutes. And yes, people think they're weak, but no, they're already overloaded. People think they're tight. No, they're contracted. So I kind of have to put my blinkers on when I go to the gym and I see all these people rolling around on foam rollers trying to loosen off their glutes tightness. It's like, oh, for God's sake, just get some orthotics. Yeah. So, that's right. Way faster.
That's right. Yeah, but it is great. And look, it's something where you have a phenomenal background and a wealth of knowledge in this. And I've got a lot of lessons that I've learned from you, as well as life experience of trying to put my body back together, but it doesn't seem that overly technical, which makes it even more scarier in the modern world and how bad people are moving. I mean, how do you think this is affecting mental well-being and someone's spirit, how they feel living this way?
Yeah, I think it's and again, great question. I think part of the problem is we don't train, like certainly when I trained in physiotherapy, we didn't look back to why somebody got broken. We were trained in the symptoms, no different from most doctors. I mean, the functional medicine doctors are now starting to look at, well, why are you getting diabetes? Why are you getting all of these other things? And let's look at the lifestyle component of your illness. So I actually blame the universities for not delving into the biomechanics enough and having therapists coming out being more competent at looking at the problem, not just the symptoms. But then I think that has a massive ramification. We're dealing with schools that see that academic performance is the most important thing. So my children's school at year 11 and 12, sport was removed from the curriculum. Now, this is where they're arguably, not my kids because I said don't worry about it, this is arguably when they're getting the most mental health stress strain. And we know through research that exercise is the most powerful non-medicinal treatment of depression. And we're knowing these kids are feeling stressed and depressed, and yet the school is removing one of the things that benefits their mental health. You also then get into this downward spiral of I feel tired, I feel stiff and sore, I don't want to exercise because I'm already in pain, I'm already feeling fatigued. And ironically, that's where, when I was referring to your tolerance or your tissue capacity, the less you do, the less tolerant it gets. So the easier it is to break you. And I know myself, like I've got really diligent, you'll be proud of me. I've finally, yes, my kids have grown up now, so I've got a little bit of time back again, but I make sure I get to the gym like 3 or 4 times a week now. And often I'll be driving straight from work. Often I'll be mentally and physically quite exhausted. And I kind of think, every single time I go, oh, I just don't feel like going today. And the girls at the front desk will laugh at me because I'll procrastinate and hope that it gets to late enough that the gym's too busy and I won't go home. But now I've seen the pattern so many times that I now just make a beeline to the gym. I just get there and I decide, you know what, if all I do is roll my legs over on the exercise bike for 20 minutes, that's something. And about the 8-minute mark, on those days where I feel flat and tired and like exercise is the last thing that I feel like I can do, at about the 8-minute mark, something happens. And I suddenly get my energy. So many times, like yesterday was case in point, I smashed myself. I had so much energy and I kind of ran out of the gym going, I feel so good, but I walked in feeling so bad. And again, I think we need to really encourage people that it's the last thing you feel like doing and the first thing that you need to do. And I think that physical exercise, as you would know, the first thing people drop is personal training when they run out of time. Or they hurt themselves and they assume that, oh, it must be because I trained that I hurt something. And it's like, no, mate, it's because you sat far too long at the desk, and then you went from the sublime to the ridiculous and your body couldn't cope. The last thing you need to give up is your physical exercise. The last thing you need to stop doing is increasing your body's tolerance to load, and yet it's the first thing we do, which is a shame.
It's crazy, isn't it? And you're so true there on when you're feeling down, because I've had that a lot. I mean, I appreciate you saying that I look good given we've just had another child. Not that I gave birth to it, of course, but yeah, I didn't feel like going to the gym today. I woke up, it was cold, felt like shit, and I was like, oh man. And as soon as I got in there, probably about within 5 to 15 minutes, you get in that groove, and it's set me up for the rest of the day. And I think about that, I'm like, man, I'm really strong. Like I'm pretty powerful internally in my strength and my willpower, and just get up and do it, Alan. Don't cop out and so on. And I thought, geez, there are people who aren't even active in their roles. They're probably lucky to walk 1,000 to 2,000 steps a day. They'll get out, they'll either live in an apartment or a house and not move, and then go in their car and then go in a lift and then sit in an office and walk 20 steps to the cafeteria or the lunchroom, walk back to the office. I'm like, far out, what's going on inside these people? Like, how are they feeling within themselves every day? How's life? Because my lowest point, when I'm just absolutely ass hanging out, got no energy, I can still perform really high if I need to and if I want to. I'm like, what's the norm for everyone else? So like you said, what's common? What's the common folk feeling that now seems to be normal?
Yeah, and again, I think that's reflected in our mental health stats. It's reflected in our diabetes. That the World Health Organization has predicted. A couple of years ago, it said the rate of diabetes in any given country will have doubled by 2030, which will put Australia at just over 12%. Now, most people don't know that diabetes each year kills more than cancer, kills more than breast cancer, prostate cancer, and brain cancer in total. Helped by the fact that we've got better treatments for certainly breast and prostate. Brain cancer we still don't really have a handle on at all. But you look at the press that those particular cancers get, and the money that is thrown into research, and the mammograms that get done, and I guess the publicity about get this checked, get that checked, and yet diabetes kills more people. Now that kills them. That's not talking about amputations from peripheral vascular disease. It's not talking about kidney failure requiring kidney dialysis. It's not talking about blindness that happens as a result of diabetes. You take insulin, you haven't cured diabetes. You've just stopped someone dying of an insulin coma then and there. So, and we know that type 2 diabetes, and I'm talking type 2, is predominantly, yes, there's genetic factors, as with everything. Genetics loads the gun and the environment pulls the trigger, but it's the lifestyle factors that are creating this diabetes epidemic in the Western society, and yet we're really not doing terribly much about it. And I think society doesn't realise how dangerous it is to have it. They go, oh yeah, I've just got the sugar diabetes and the doctor gave me a pill. And it's like, oh my God, do you know what the next 20 years is going to look like if you make it that far? So we have a health crisis, and I think that we're just not going about it in the right way at kind of trying to find some solutions. And even though, Black Dog Institute released a couple of years ago an excellent literature review that showed that exercise was the most powerful non-medicinal treatment for depression, as I said before, we're reducing the amount of physical activity that we do with kids. Now, as Rudyard Kipling said, give me the child and I'll show you the man. We are training our children not to exercise and not to be health conscious. And what a surprise, later in life, they aren't. It's so much harder to get somebody who's never exercised before at the age of 40 to suddenly come and do it than if they were just in the habit of doing it since, they first went to school and exercise was part of a daily routine. And that's why personal trainers are fabulous, because they basically give people, you are their conscience. You get them out of bed and you make them do stuff that they don't want to do. You sure as hell made me do stuff I didn't want to do.
As to get back at you after the elbows of death were just me in half.
Yeah. Revenge is sweet.
That's right.
But yeah, I think we collectively need to change society's attitude about, physical fitness not just being about the aesthetics. In fact, very little of it truly is about aesthetics, as you would know. Like if you, so many people think, oh, I'm going to go to the gym to lose weight. And you go, well, the best way to lose weight is to modify your diet. But going to the gym, being healthy mentally and physically, that's what, training is all about. And I think moving forward, I'd love to see there be a less of a focus on the aesthetics and more of a focus on health. And people need to understand the genuine value of movement in health in general. So many diseases are impacted positively by moving and loading the body. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's almost like, I don't know if polarization is the word, but you've got one end which is, like I said, the aesthetics, pills, shakes, diets, whatever it is to make someone look really good. And then the other end, people are quietly just falling apart pretty much from childhood, really, in a way where movement isn't part of their life at all, even though it's something primal in us for, I don't know, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever you want to call in the time period in which we've been around. But when you look at that, it's like, well, where's this happy middle ground that someone's promoting, pushing in an effective light that isn't trying to get rich quick with all these promises of fake results, or just treat symptoms instead of finding the source and causes to actually help really build, as a species or as humanity should, a higher level of being, because we've got physical things in place, the mindset's better, everything comes as a flow of us moving better and feeling better because we're doing things that are a part of who we are. It seems pretty normal, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's funny, you go to the zoo and so many people will say, oh, isn't it sad? Look at the lions, standing on concrete. That's not their natural environment. Have a look outside. I think we've got these beautifully developed frontal lobes, and we have forgotten that we are fundamentally animals. We are beautifully designed to be walking the grassy plains of Africa. And as I frequently say, I don't think Neanderthal man wandered around looking for a rock with a backrest. Humans are designed to move. I would argue black and blue through scientific biomechanics that we did a great job getting up off all fours. That wasn't the problem. The problem was we got up off all fours and then we sat back down on our asses. That's where it was an issue. So
Yeah.
I think until we start to educate the masses and educate the educators, it needs to start with schools. Governments need to get a grasp on exercise as medicine, because we're going to very quickly get to an economic point. We're not going to be able to afford the ill health that we are creating today, that we are going to see and have to treat in 20 years' time. If you take diabetes, type 2 diabetes as an example, with that World Health Organization prediction, Australia is not going to be able to afford to have 12% of its population with type 2 diabetes, because who's going to pay for the insulin? Who's going to pay for the kidney dialysis machines? So 50% of people will need insulin, 20% will need kidney dialysis. And that takes them out of the effective workforce for 15 hours a week. Let's round it up to 20 by the time they get to and from the hospital. So you've effectively got a part-time workforce to deliver taxes to fund all of the labour and the equipment for kidney dialysis, for diabetes. We're literally going to run out of money in health. But the problem is no government is prepared to do the hard yards, look at the food that we're consuming, look at the lack of exercise, look at the cost of all of those things. They're not prepared to make a statement today to save tomorrow, because they're probably not going to be in power tomorrow. It's no different from what we're doing to the planet. Everybody wants to save the planet, just don't make me sacrifice something today. Because I can't afford that today. And you go, right, well, where are we going with that? So that's a whole other podcast.
Yes, absolutely. But it's one that has a lot of power, no doubt. And I agree with you absolutely on that one as well. But it is pretty scary though, isn't it? And I know you touched on genetics, but it's the second thing you said that rings true with me, the environment. And we're a byproduct of our environment, and even at a cellular level, you've seen it, and I've seen it plenty of times with epigenetics on that sort of stuff. And while genetics can play a role, I don't know, people who sit back and just blame that for a reason why they may have X, Y, Z, not just diabetes. It's like, well, have you really done everything you can within your power to provide a platform from which at a cellular level you can nourish yourself and really, really blossom and be who you can be? And the answer is no, 99% of the times. But it is scary, Nat, because children in the future, like I said, with schooling and helping educating, that it's like this big black hole. It's just missing. It's like, oh, what's this? What do we do with this? Oh, it's a soccer ball. You should kick it. But yeah, we'll see, Natty. We'll see. As long as people like you are still around, we can certainly lead the charge and try as best as we can.
Well, I think that's all you can do, and that's the best of it. And I think as I said, getting out there and educating people like you're doing is exactly what needs to happen. That's certainly the first step to anything, is education always. So. But look, it's hard, because you're also dealing with people's belief systems. I've treated a lot of elite athletes, and they think, well, hang on a minute, I'm not broken, so I'm not going to do any of the background stuff that you've told me I need to do, because I'm performing really well. And you kind of go, yeah, but you can potentially perform better. You can be more effective, more efficient, more powerful if you do some of the boring stuff in the background. So, it's kind of everybody who doesn't want to have to work too hard. So, don't change me. I don't want to change.
That's right. Yeah. So true, though.
I want the results without the work.
Yeah, that's right. It's so true, though. And that's something that I learned from you that's really helped me, I think, really have a great, which I saw as a career in CrossFit at a high level. I don't compete with regionals anymore, but it's because I was constantly striving for that excellence. Yeah, you're 110 kilos and you can handstand walk, awesome. Can I do it a bit better? Can I do it more efficiently? Can I breathe better? Can I have everything engaged a bit more? And it's not that it's never settling in the right light. It's not that I was never happy. There's plenty of times where I reflected and rewarded myself and had that admiration of, digging in and doing the hard stuff, which is always, like you said, the boring, quiet stuff. That's the hard stuff. Anyone can flog themselves, but it paid off. I mean, I haven't seen anyone my size while I was competing. No one my size was doing what I was doing, and it's something that, without comparing to others, it's something that was a result that came to fruition because of that mindset that you helped me create as well, which is it's all the difference. That's the thing. All those
Yeah,
little.
and
Oh,
it is. It's a lot of hard work, and once people buy into their own belief system, it can be very difficult to shift it. I think keeping your mind open to, well, hang on a minute, does that make sense? Let's look at it. Is a good
mm,
start.
mm,
But yeah, people don't like change. And it's no different. Like weight loss is a classic. I'll do anything, just don't make me change what I eat or do exercise.
mm,
And you go, right, okay, well, and then we come up with all the excuses as to, oh no, why that particular diet didn't work. And you
mm.
go, yeah, more times than not, it's you that didn't work. So,
That's right.
I think I told you about the book that I wrote about diet. Did I tell you about that?
They said you're going to write one called "The Earth Was Flat," but I'm waiting
Yeah,
for
no,
that one.
that's I'm still doing that one. No, this was a diet book, and it was called "If Nobody Sees Me Eat It, It Doesn't Have Calories."
That's awesome. What a good
It,
title.
it had one page, and the page said, "Stop lying to yourself."
Yes.
And again, that was from my own journey. It's like, oh, this packet of Tim Tams, nobody's here. That it doesn't exist if a tree falls in the forest. So, like, if I eat the whole thing and there's no evidence that it was ever occurred, oh no, it's just a little Tim
Right.
Tam.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've put on so much weight.
Yes. Where just so our listeners and viewers know, where can we get that book, Nat? Where can we?
um,
Is it
yeah,
QC
I'll do an
stores?
online version.
Dymix. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Crack up. Talk to us. Actually, talk to us about Nitro, Natty. Nitro Circus, ice hockey, treating international superstars, and some of the other famous people. I'd love to, just get you, I guess, a bit of insight into the experience you had with that arena.
Gosh, where to start? Where to start? I better start by plugging my battery in because my laptop's about to go. So give me 2 seconds.
All right. Very
Hang
good.
on.
Very good. Yeah, in the meantime, guys, so talking about Natty, she phenomenal lady. The elbow of death is real. It absolutely is, and it brought a lot of heartache, a lot of pain, but in the end, the rewards were there. So it's pretty interesting because I thought I knew everything, and this isn't hacking on because I'm not naming names, but plenty of professional physiotherapists when I was on fringe first grade and playing first grade squads with rugby league. None of them gave me that ability to educate myself and that guidance and what was important for me, which was so important in the end because I tore my knee apart, had 4 operations with my knee, 2 shoulder reconstructions, elbow operation. Broken jaw doesn't come down to that. That was my own fault for trying to headbutt someone, but it was tough. But here she is, the lady is back, and I was just singing your good graces, Natty, saying how much you actually educated. That's the big thing, help and educate me on what's important, what I can do moving forward instead of just treating my leg or my back. And there you go, mate. And so much better for it because you can do it for life.
Yeah, and again, appreciate that. There's 101 ways to skin a cat, and you speak to 20 different physios, you've got 20 different ideas. So it's just the way I look at the world and I view it, and it seems to work for the most part for the patients that we see. But it's there's more than one way to look at any situation, I think. But I guess the glamorous side of supposedly my career. I travelled with Nitro for the better part of a decade, which took me to various places around the world, which was very fortunate to see some places like Macau that I would never normally go to. Swimming with sharks in South Africa, pretty cool. Doing whitewater rafting in New Zealand with a bunch of idiots. And that's kind of the funny thing. Is like I'm a conservative middle-aged mother of 2 that ends up traveling the world with these complete lunatic young boys. That I was kind of like mum on tour, to be fair. But it got me out of my comfort zone a bit and experiencing some things. I don't think I would have otherwise bungee jumped, but we happened to be in New Zealand and it was there and I didn't have to line up for it and nobody was watching. So I kind of went, okay, well, I'll go up, and if I don't feel like doing it, I'll just come back down again. But I did it. I can't say I loved it.
Bungee jumping, wow, that's something else.
But it was, I think I would have, otherwise I would have got on the plane and been annoyed that I hadn't done it because it was just so easy for me to do it. There's really no excuse. But a lot of times people kind of go, oh, how did you get that gig? And As with most things in life, and certainly physio in elite teams and that sort of stuff, it's who you know, not what you know. We kind of earned it a bit though, because it was actually the CEO's wife that came for treatment, and I was able to help her for a condition that that she hadn't been able to get relief from for a number of years. So then he came in, and then one time, this was before Nitro started, but they rang me in Melbourne. It was Crusty Demons they were looking after, and they said, "Oh, look, the boys are broken. How do we find in Melbourne somebody that does what you do?" And I said, "Well, I trained in Melbourne. I know lots of people, but what we do is a little bit different from the average physio." So in the end, we agreed that, he flew a couple of our staff down there to treat the boys, and then all of a sudden we were on tour, and then all of a sudden the same promoters that did Nitro Circus, that did Rusty Demons, were doing Nitro Circus, and somewhere in there we were included in the team. So we were sort of there from the beginning. And then I think that opened eyes to a number of different people about the value of having a physio in the entertainment industry. I mean, Nitros, I never called the boys athletes, because they weren't. They were performers, because I think athletes actually do strengthening work and try and look after their bodies from a dietary and hydration perspective. That wasn't something that the odd one could be accused of doing that, but most of them couldn't. So then I guess that probably helped with, getting gigs like the ice hockey, and we did college football that came out a couple of years in a row to Sydney. So the American college football that they did the first round of their season, they came and did at ANZ Stadium. And then, then you get to know promoters and production companies. And then, okay, we've got Guns N' Roses, we've got Adele, we've got Eminem, we've got Hilltop Hoods. And most of the time we keep that sort of thing. Part of the reason they like us is because we're quiet about that sort of stuff. It's not splashed all over social media and what have you. We certainly don't do selfies with the stars. And but often people will find out that we were looking after some mega star at Kudos or something, and they'll be like, "Oh, but why does a physio need to turn up for Adele?" Or why does Eminem need a physio? And it's like, well, singers are humans too.
It's hard work what they do, and they're performing and moving around a lot,
but not even that. I mean, they have backs and necks just like everybody else. They sit doing interviews. They 9 times out of 10 they have to get their own luggage off the carousel. They don't always have some little lackey doing that for them. They're in and out of foreign beds. I mean, I mean that in the nicest possible way.
That's how I took it.
I'm not. What goes on tour stays on tour. I'm not telling you. But no, they spend a lot of time sitting and doing they do normal things that normal people do. They celebrities and playing the class. It's more comfortable, but it's still not ergonomically friendly. So. There's an awful lot of particularly neck and back issues. And as you say, the odd performance jumping around all over the stage, certainly makes sense. Kylie Minogue got answers. And when you watch them perform, you go, "Oh my God, I forgot him, but it could move that way." Quite incredible what they did. But for the most part, they're just normal people that need normal physio treatment because they get back pain, neck pain, foot pain, whatever. So, so yeah, everybody thinks it's really glamorous, but it's actually exactly the same thing that we do in rooms here. We just do it in a different location. And it certainly kept things interesting and entertaining for me because it does change the paint on the walls. But fundamentally, I do the same job wherever I go.
Did you have a favourite out of all of those? I didn't know Adele as well, or any of those.
Oh, I told you not. We don't talk about that stuff. Look, I would have to say Kylie Minogue's team. I've done them a couple of times. Far and away, like the most professional, appreciative, just genuinely nice human beings to work with. And actually the ice hockey guys are pretty good too. You know, it was interesting working with them because, you know, you hear these NHL stars and really they don't, it's surprising how little physical therapy they get, despite what they do. But I think there's also a bit of a disparity between, you know, like so many of them said, we don't have anything like you in America. And part of that is literally true, that Aussie physios are renowned for their manual therapy, and American physical therapists are, like, they are a lot more exercise based. So I don't really know who's doing manual therapy in America, but it's not as it's you know, it's kind of like there's massage and then there's exercise, and they don't really have somebody that kind of, I don't know, has the
Just
same.
a little Chinese store and that's it.
We get that, but you know, it's one of the reasons I have students from an American university is because the manual therapy teaching there is, there's an even bigger gap than there is here. So yeah, it's always fascinating having people come from the States in particular, and you know, that I get unleashed in them, and they're kind of like, what the hell was that? And it's like, I'm a physio, and just go, you're not like any physical therapist I've seen. It's like, well, no, because they think they're going to get exercises. So, you know, when I attack them with my talons, it's like, oh my god, so that has to be managed very carefully. So, but yeah, that's kind of the glamorous side of things, I guess.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? That difference though, like, because they're, especially ice hockey, it is phenomenal what those guys do on the ice. They've got to be one of the best human movement performers in the world. Like, it's crazy, and a bunch of exercises, and that's sort of almost it.
Yeah, and look, you know, I've actually, you know, at the tender age of 50, I've become an ardent ice hockey fan, to the point that, you know, my team's actually in the Stanley Cup as we speak. So they went from bottom of the ladder to, on January 3rd, they were the bottom of the league, and now they're basically 2 games away from winning the entire thing, which is pretty epic.
Because of your hands.
Yeah, no, I haven't touched any of these guys. But, you know, I've become, like, I just appreciate that they put me on the glass at one of the American matches, because I've become friends with a number of the ex-NHL players. And so they said very kindly, you know, super bunch of guys, whenever I'm in the States, like, let us know which city you're in and we'll see if we can hook you up with some an NHL game. And one time I got put on the glass, and I think that it was like, I imagine the first shot of heroin might be, that I still remember the moment where I fell in love with the sport and I went, this is epic. And part of it was that, I guess prior to that, I always saw it as a bit of a, you know, a bulldozer game like rugby. I used to say it's just like rugby, but slippery. But I think when I was on the glass, I appreciated the incredible skill that they have, like the art of ice hockey, and you know, the puck basically going in at 120 kilometers an hour in a space that's about 5 centimeters above the goalie's shoulder and below the bar of the net. And they've just pinged it straight in the middle, whilst they're skating either forwards or backwards, having fallen over and got back up in the same movement. And the transition of them on and off the ice, you don't even know that they're only on the ice for sort of 30 to 45 seconds at a time. And you kind of go, I don't see them moving. There's constant movement. So anyway, I ramble on about ice hockey. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. They're super fit. A lot of aerobic fitness, because it is only that 30 to 45 seconds at a time. So it's 3 lots of 20 minutes of match. And you know, the most anybody would normally play, like if they play 20 minutes, if they have 20 minutes of ice time in total across the 60-minute match, that's a lot of ice time. Most of them will average between, you know, 12 and 16 minutes of ice time.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, it's very different sport, essentially.
Oh, definitely. And they're doing it all on those little blades. That's what really impresses me. Like, the surface area is nothing, like of their actual footing, I guess. you'd call it. But
Oh
yeah.
no, it's unbelievable, and I think that just makes it like it's kind of almost doing everything that rugby does, but also moving at the same time within that movement. So
Mm.
it's like I used to watch ballet, the Australian ballet, when I was young, and then I started watching figure skating and ice dancing thanks to Torval and Dean, and I went, ballet's actually boring because ice skating is ballet but moving at the same time.
Mm.
And you're jumping up and landing on a blade, as you say, that's like a knife edge. Like,
Mm.
how do people do that? But then as a physiotherapist, I always went, ice skaters always have the best posture because they have to be aligned against gravity, otherwise they fall over. So you look at any skater, they actually, like figure skater, the ice hockey players are constantly bent forward, so they always have super tight. Yeah, any figure skater, they have sublime posture because they cannot have bad posture on the ice or they fall over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Fair point. Yeah.
yeah.
There you go. That's awesome. That and look, I love having you on today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights and views on the health and fitness world, as well as some of your personal stories, especially the ice hockey. I'll have to come out. I can't come out to that game, unfortunately, but I will come out to another one. It's annually every June, isn't it? They do it.
Yeah. So the ones on the 15th of June, 15th, 16th, whatever Saturday is, 15th of June, in Sydney, and then they go down to Melbourne for the 21st and the 22nd of June. So
Okay.
yeah, they come out now once a year. It's a pretty good show.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There.
Can I pretend to be a physio? I'll come to Melbourne with you, or just drop some elbows in. Not as effective.
Nah, it's easy. You don't need the qualification.
Crack up. No, it's been awesome, that. And I'm just curious, where to next? Life of Natty. Anything in the pipeline, or anything coming up or in the pipelines for yourself?
Well, the last 3 years I've been getting involved in concussion management. So Australia's about a decade behind the US and Canada. And actually it's through the ice hockey guys that the whole concussion story started, and I didn't realise that you could rehabilitate concussion. Like, here, just you rest it and the brain heals kind of thing. So I've gone over to the States and Canada 3 years in a row and done a bit of a tour of Concussion Beauty and brought back a whole heap of stuff that's very new in Australia. And, that's been super interesting to realise that there can be ongoing visual or vestibular disturbances in particular in concussion, and rehabilitate them. So it's one of those topics that's in the media at the moment quite a bit with our contact sports, and it's interesting because everybody's talking about all of the issues that have happened down the track to these professional athletes who've been repeatedly concussed and assumed. And it's talking about actually if you get it early, like everything else, you can rehabilitate it. So it's no different from if you damage a knee. If you rest it, it'll heal up. If you rest it and then just get along with life, you'll probably get along with life okay, but it'll probably come back and bite you on the ass in 20 or 30 years' time because you haven't actually rehabbed it properly. Whereas if you, as you would know, if you do a graded strength training program and you address the weakness that's happened as a result of the injury, then 20 or 30 years later, you don't even know that you've actually had an issue. So we're at the point of, we've got these professional athletes that are now looking back at 20 years before or 30 years before and said, oh yeah, I hurt my brain back then and now I've got all of these problems. And it's like, okay, yeah, that happened now, but we are in the situation where now we know that if you do the rehab straight out of the gates, the risk of those things happening in 20 or 30 years' time are considerably less. Australia's not there yet.
That's fascinating, though. I didn't know that at all, especially with the brain and concussion. That's awesome.
Well, it's a mild head injury. So physios treat stroke. They treat head injuries from car accidents and all sorts of things. So it kind of makes sense that we would have a rehab role. It's just a diluted version of what we do in neurological rehabilitation hospitals and stuff. We get trained in neurological rehab. So when I was flying back from Canada, I was kind of like, oh, it's a bit of a no-brainer, no pun intended, that we get involved in something that is related to the brain. But unfortunately, the message that the ARU is pushing at the moment is rest is best. And they're also throwing it to the medical fraternity, saying that it's a medical diagnosis and a player needs to be cleared by a doctor before they can come back to play. And that's just mitigation of litigation, that really all they're saying is we don't want to be responsible. We're going to throw it over to the medical fraternity, which is great, except you haven't educated the doctors in, how to manage it. Our role as physios is to do all of these assessments and say, no, they've got vestibular, or no, they've got visual problems, or they've got post-concussive cervical spine issues. Feed the information to the doctor, who can then, by all means, make a medical determinant as to whether the player is ready to go on board. But it's really messy, because the ARU is saying, yeah, we're handing over to the doctors. The doctors don't. The ones that don't know what they don't know are going to go, how do you feel? I feel fine. Okay, you're cleared. The ones that do know what they don't know are probably going to say, I don't know enough about this. I don't want to have my signature on a legal document. Go and see a sports physician. You might be in the same situation there. But it's kind of like, well, the doctors aren't being trained in doing the assessments to know whether somebody actually does have a concussion or not. So I'm a little annoyed at the ARU, because I think they're pushing the wrong message to clubs and things about that. So
Absolutely. Keep on pushing, Natty. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it professionally, and I've got a good team here of physios that we're always looking at interesting and different things to do. And actually, we've got a new machine that you might be interested in soon. Obviously, it's not an issue for you at the moment with your new bub being born, but we have a shockwave machine that's one of its only kind in Australia that actually treats erectile dysfunction.
Yes. Oh, geez, I thought you meant a shock machine to treat me for all the nightmares I've had since you used to treat me. Although you did work, but yeah, erectile. Okay.
Yeah, so
do you want to talk to Corinne about? I don't know. Who do you?
Well, statistically, over the age of 40, things start to not work so well. So, we'll see you shortly enough.
I'll see you shortly enough. I like that, Nat. That was good.
You got to keep it light.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
And it's a difficult topic. And as I said to one patient, this is all for practice. Harden up if you're going to harden up.
That's right. That's right. It's cracking up. Can't believe they made a machine like that. Who would have thought? Yeah,
well, it actually treats other things as well. It treats plantar fasciitis and tendonitis, but as a side product, I don't quite know who discovered it. The other capacity, but it turns out it actually does that very, very well, like nothing else. So
wow, interesting. Would have been an interesting discovery in how they found that out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time, Natty. Thanks for jumping on and joining me.
My pleasure.
It's been great. Really enjoyed this catch up, and I should have sent you some flowers. I didn't realise. When was your 50th?
A couple of years ago now, mate.
Did I send you flowers? No, maybe not. I know I've randomly sent you them before. That was your wedding anniversaries.
You did send them. No,
I'm digging hard. I'm trying to dig out of this hole that I've put myself in.
You sent me flowers on my birthday. No, 18 months ago it was.
Yes, okay. So, lovely. Yeah. Jeez, it goes quick, doesn't it?
Time flies. Does go fast. It does go fast. So, I got hubby's 50th coming up on Wednesday. So, he'll be an old man like his old woman now. So,
nice.
All good. Good.
Phenomenal shape, Natty, and an inspiration to all of us, men and women.
Oh, well, thank you. But, and right back at you. So, Mutual Admiration Society we've got going here. So, how long do we play this Mutual Admiration tennis for?
I don't know how long do people want to listen for.
I don't know.
But I mean it. You're just stirring me up. I'm still too young to get any of that stuff yet. So,
well, I'm
got to earn it more.
I'm assuming you can edit most of this out, so the whole erectile dysfunction thing is probably going to hopefully not hit the airwaves.
That'll be the highlight. That'll be the first minute I'll put out as the intro of what's coming.
This is what the show's on today.
That's what show's about. That's it. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Thanks again, Natty. And
pleasure.
And thank you guys for watching or listening. And what's that saying? Do you have a sign off, Natty, that you'd like to use?
No.
My last guest said that's the way the cookie crumbles, which I thought was quite funny. But no.
Oh, my classic is pull your head in, but I mean it actually quite literally. So because too many people, poke their head forward and get sore shoulders. Right. So I'm often heard to yell out to a patient as they walk out the door, "Pull your head in,"
Yes, that's right.
which is always difficult to explain to new patients because they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe she said that to somebody."
What have I done wrong?
Yeah,
That's
like,
right.
no. I mean it therapeutically.
That's right. And we'll finish with that then, guys. Thank you for listening and watching. And pull your head in and stand up straight. And I'll see you on the next one.
Ciao.
Thanks, Natalie.